Sometimes we think the hardest part of love is letting go, but the truth is, you're good. Bye isn't the end of the story, it's the beginning of his karma. The moment you walk away, you stop carrying the weight of his choices, and he's left to deal with the consequences of losing you. And trust me, that absence will speak louder than any words you could ever say. When you say goodbye, you're not just walking away from someone, you're reclaiming your power. Most people think the strongest position in a relationship is the person who gets to stay, the one who has the last word, or the one who seems unaffected. But the truth is, the real power move is in being the one who decides, this is no longer good for me, and has the courage to leave. Because when you walk away, you change the entire dynamic. You remove the thing he has taken for granted, your presence. Presence is something we underestimate. We assume people notice us only when we're loud, when we confront, when we make demands. But the reality is your consistent presence, your time, your messages, your patience, your energy was the quiet, invaluable gift you were giving every single day. And when that's gone, it's like oxygen leaving the room. Suddenly, the comfort he built his world on disappears, and he feels the emptiness. That is why your goodbye becomes so powerful. It's not a performance, it's a reset of the balance. Think about it, as long as you stay, even when you're hurt, even when you're disrespected, you're cushioning him from the truth. He doesn't have to face the cost of his actions because you're still there. You might be upset, you might be complaining, you might be distant, but you're still in orbit around him. And as long as you orbit, he feels safe. You're good. Bye is the moment that safety net vanishes. Suddenly, he has to stand on his own choices without your love propping him up. There's also something deeply magnetic about walking away with self-respect. It's not about playing games or trying to manipulate him into missing you. It's about saying, I know my value, and I'm not going to stay where it's ignored. That act alone communicates more than any lecture ever could. Because words can be debated, but absence is undeniable. He can dismiss your complaints, he can minimize your emotions, but he can't dismiss the empty space where you used to be. That silence forces him to listen in a way he never did before. And here's the part people often miss. Walking away is not about punishing him, it's about protecting you. The moment you leave, you start reclaiming the energy you've been pouring into someone who didn't appreciate it. You give yourself back to yourself. That decision might feel painful at first, but it plants the seed of your own healing and growth. At the same time, it inevitably creates a ripple effect in his world, because now, instead of relying on your forgiveness or your patience, he's left to deal with the void. It's in that void that the lessons live. He begins to notice what's missing, not just your physical presence, but the small ways you enriched his life, the emotional support you gave, the stability you offered. That realization doesn't always come immediately, but when it does, it hits harder than you think. And the irony is that the power he thought he had by neglecting or undervaluing you evaporates the second you decide not to play that role anymore. Walking away is not weakness, it's the opposite. It's the declaration that your standards matter. It's the reminder that love should be a gift, not a sacrifice of your dignity. And when you embrace that truth, you don't just shift the balance in the relationship, you shift the balance in yourself. That shift is the most powerful move you can ever make, and it begins the moment you say goodbye. People often talk about karma like it's some distant, cosmic event, as if one day, far in the future, life will punish someone for what they did wrong. But sometimes karma doesn't arrive years later. Sometimes it comes in the very moment a person loses what they didn't value. That's the truth when it comes to relationships. His karma isn't some grand universal payback down the line. It's the reality that he no longer has access to you. Losing you is the consequence of his choices, and that is the most immediate and powerful form of karma he could ever face. When someone takes you for granted, they behave as though you'll always be there. They assume your kindness is endless, your patience unshakable, and your love unconditional no matter how little they give back. They stop investing, stop appreciating, and they live in this false sense of security that no matter what they do, you'll stay. But the moment you walk away, that illusion collapses. Suddenly, the person who was always available is gone. The one who answered the calls, who soothed the bad days, who brought warmth and light into the everyday vanishes. And the reality of that absence is his karma. What makes this so profound is that it isn't about revenge or punishment. It's not about you needing to teach him a lesson. You don't have to. Life does that naturally, because once someone loses access to your energy, they start to feel what life looks like without it. And no matter what he tries to fill that gap with, whether it's distractions, new people, or denial, nothing replaces the unique value you brought. That's the part most people don't realize until it's gone. Karma is not just the loss, it's the realization of what was lost. There's a certain sting in knowing you had something rare and mishandled it, and while he may not admit it to you, that truth doesn't go away. It lingers. It shows up late at night when the distractions quiet down, when the messages aren't coming in, when the comfort of your presence is no longer there. That's when karma feels the sharpest, when he recognizes that his own behavior pushed away the very thing he thought would never leave. You see, people can fool themselves for a long time. They can tell themselves you weren't that important, that they'll find someone else, that you were replaceable. But deep down, when you've given genuine love, loyalty, and care, that impression leaves a mark. Even if pride stops him from saying it, the loss is undeniable. And what's ironic is that his karma is not you being angry, bitter, or trying to get back at him. His karma is you thriving without him. His karma is you reclaiming your life, your energy, and your joy, while he sits with the reality that he doesn't get to experience it anymore. That's why the most powerful thing you can ever do is let go. Because the moment you step away, you remove the safety net he thought he had. You make him face the truth of his actions without shielding him from the outcome, and in that space, he encounters the purest form of karma there is, the weight of his own choices. Losing you is not just about losing a relationship. It's about losing the person who believed in him, who supported him, who stood by him. That's not something people recover from easily, and that's what makes it karma in the truest sense. Silence is often underestimated. We live in a world where people believe power comes from what we say, how loudly we say it, or how strongly we argue our point. But the truth is, silence often speaks louder than words ever could. When someone hurts you, disrespects you, or takes you for granted, your instinct may be to fight for them to understand, to explain, to make them see the pain they caused. But every time you try to make them understand, you give them a platform to argue back, to justify themselves, to twist your reality. Silence takes away that platform. It's not about weakness or avoidance. It's about refusing to waste energy where it won't be valued. When you go silent, you remove the noise, and in that quiet, people are forced to confront themselves. That's where karma begins to work. Because silence is not just the absence of words, it's the absence of validation, of reassurance, of comfort. If someone has grown accustomed to you always explaining, always reaching out, always filling the gaps, then your silence feels like a void they can't escape. And it's in that void that the truth finally echoes. They start to hear what they ignored when you were speaking. They start to feel the weight of what they dismissed when you tried to explain. Revenge may give a momentary sense of satisfaction, but it rarely brings peace. Silence, on the other hand, is deeply peaceful because it shifts the focus back to you. Instead of wasting hours trying to craft the perfect response or replaying the same arguments, you simply choose not to engage. That choice reclaims your dignity. It tells the other person without words that they no longer have access to you in the way they once did. Silence is a boundary, and boundaries are powerful. They don't punish, they protect. And here's the irony, silence often delivers a stronger impact than anger ever could. Anger can be dismissed as emotional, dramatic, or overblown. Silence can't be dismissed, it lingers. It creates questions, it forces reflection. When you stop responding, stop reacting, stop explaining, the other person no longer has control over the narrative. They can't twist your words or minimize your feelings because you've given them nothing to work with. Instead, they are left alone with their thoughts, replaying their actions, wondering why the dynamic has shifted. That wondering is where discomfort grows, and that discomfort is part of their karma. Silence also sends a subtle but undeniable message. I don't need to prove myself to you anymore. That's where the real power lies. You're not trying to make them feel guilty. You're not begging for them to wake up and realize your worth. You've simply withdrawn your attention. And when attention is no longer freely given, it becomes valuable. They notice what it feels like to no longer have it, and that realization is far more impactful than any words could ever be. Of course, silence isn't easy. It takes restraint. It takes self-respect. It takes the belief that you don't need closure from someone who already showed you they couldn't give it. But once you embrace silence, you begin to see that it's not about them anymore, it's about you. It's about creating space for your healing, for your clarity, for your peace. And in that space, while you're moving forward, the other person is left behind, dealing with the silence you left behind. That's where the karmic balance is restored, not because you sought revenge, but because you chose peace over chaos. When you finally walk away, something shifts in a way that nothing else could. As long as you were there, even if you were unhappy, even if you were arguing, he never truly had to face himself. Your presence shielded him from the weight of his own behavior. You might have been hurt, but you were still giving him attention. You might have been upset, but you were still answering the phone. That safety net allowed him to avoid reflecting on the consequences of his actions. But the moment you say goodbye, that net disappears, and suddenly he's confronted with the mirror he's been avoiding all along. Your absence has a way of forcing reflection that your words never could. You could have spent hours explaining how his behavior hurt you, listing all the ways he made you feel unappreciated, begging for change. But as long as you stayed, he could dismiss it. He could minimize your feelings or tell himself that you'd never really leave. But when you actually go, when you stop giving him access to you, there's no denial left. The quiet that follows is his reminder. It leaves him alone with the truth of what he's lost, and that silence becomes the loudest teacher of all. Reflection often doesn't come immediately. At first, he may try to distract himself, to convince himself he doesn't care, to run toward anything that will numb the discomfort. But over time, the reality begins to sink in. The moments where he would normally reach out to you are now met with emptiness. The comfort of your support is no longer there. He begins to notice the absence of the little things, the messages that used to brighten his day, the way you used to listen, the steadiness of your presence. Those realizations creep in slowly, and they can't be ignored. That is when reflection begins, and it almost always comes too late. What's powerful here is that you don't have to try to make him reflect. You don't have to push, demand, or prove anything. Your goodbye does the work for you. It creates a space where he has no choice but to look inward, and often that reflection comes with regret. Because when he finally sees clearly, he realizes that the relationship he thought was secure was actually fragile, and it shattered because of his own neglect. That recognition stings in a way no external punishment ever could, because it comes from within. The irony is that your goodbye isn't just about him, it's about you too. While he's left reflecting, you're moving forward. You're creating space for your own growth, you're healing your peace. You're starting a new chapter, free from the cycle of trying to convince someone of your worth. And as you rise, as you rebuild, that contrast only sharpens his reflection. He doesn't just see that you're gone, he sees that you're thriving without him. That awareness is often what drives the deepest regret. It forces him to reflect not only on what he lost, but on what he could have had if he had chosen differently. Reflection is one of the hardest forms of karma because it doesn't go away. Distractions fade, new connections may come and go, but the memory of losing someone who truly cared is lasting. Your goodbye becomes the turning point where he has to face the reality of himself. And whether he admits it or not, that reflection will follow him, reminding him of the choices he made and the love he let slip away. When you step away from someone who didn't value you, the most powerful thing you can do isn't to show them your pain, it's to show them your healing. At first, it may feel like all you're left with is the hurt, the disappointment, the sense of betrayal. But over time, as you start to rebuild yourself, as you begin to pour energy back into your own life, something remarkable happens. You rise, you glow differently. You carry yourself with a kind of freedom and strength that only comes from surviving what you once thought would break you. That transformation is where your true power lies, and whether he admits it or not, that healing becomes his lesson. For a long time, he might have believed that you would never walk away, that even if you did, you'd always be stuck in the pain he left you with. He may have thought you'd never find your footing again, that losing him would leave you shattered permanently. But healing has a way of disproving those assumptions. Every step you take toward your own peace, every new joy you create, every success you celebrate, sends a silent but undeniable message: you didn't need him to be whole. In fact, you're better without him. That realization is part of his karma because it forces him to face the fact that the person he undervalued is now thriving without his presence. Healing isn't about pretending it never hurt. It's about choosing not to stay in the hurt. It's about waking up one day and realizing that the pain no longer controls you, that your life is expanding again, and that you are no longer living in the shadow of someone else's choices. And that process is magnetic. People notice it, he notices it, because while he may have expected you to stay stuck, your growth becomes undeniable. It becomes the very proof of your strength, and that strength becomes the lesson he never expected to learn. The irony is that he might not even realize it at first. At first, he might try to convince himself that you'll never truly move on, that deep down you're still waiting for him. But then he sees it, the way you carry yourself, the peace in your voice, the light in your eyes that wasn't there when you were weighed down by his neglect. That sight alone forces reflection. He's left to wonder what it would have been like if he had shown up differently, if he had treated you with the care you deserved. That wondering is part of his karma, because he can't unsee the truth. You're doing just fine without him. Your healing also sends a bigger message. Love isn't supposed to break you, and when it does, you always have the power to rebuild. By choosing to heal, you show him and anyone else watching that your life isn't defined by what someone else did or didn't do. That strength is the greatest lesson of all, because it's not just about him. It's about you reclaiming your story. And yet, in the process, he's forced to face the reality that the very person he took for granted has become untouchable to him. That's the cruel beauty of karma. Sometimes it's not about dramatic payback or seeing someone suffer. Sometimes it's simply about them realizing, in their own quiet moments, that they lost the best version of you, the version that now exists because you chose to heal, not because of them, but in spite of them. And while you're busy moving forward, building a life full of love, joy, and fulfillment, he's left with the memory of who you were and the undeniable truth of who you've become. That contrast is the lesson, and it's one he'll never forget. Saying goodbye can feel like the hardest thing in the world. It feels final, like you're closing a door on a chapter that once meant everything to you. But what so many people don't realize in that moment is that goodbye isn't just an ending, it's a beginning. It's the start of your new chapter, one that's no longer defined by waiting for someone to change, no longer tied to disappointment, no longer shrinking yourself to fit into a love that didn't honor you. Your goodbye is the doorway to freedom, to peace, and to a future that's actually worthy of you. When you walk away, it may feel like loss, and in some ways it is. You're losing the version of life you thought you'd have with this person. You're losing the comfort of what was familiar, even if it wasn't good for you. But in that loss, you gain something greater: space. Space for yourself, space for healing, space for growth. Space for the kind of love and opportunities that couldn't find you while you were tied to someone who wasn't choosing you the way you deserved. That's why goodbye is not a weakness, it's a declaration that you are ready for more. So often, people hold on to relationships long after they've expired because they're afraid of the unknown. The fear of starting over feels heavier than the pain of staying. But once you actually say goodbye, once you take that step, you realize that the unknown is not something to fear, it's something to embrace. Because in that space where one story ends, a new one begins, and you get to be the author this time. You're no longer waiting for someone else to treat you right. You're creating a life where being treated right is the standard. Goodbye also shifts the focus back to you. When you were in the relationship, so much of your energy went into managing, fixing, or holding onto something that was slipping through your hands. You might have been trying to prove your worth, to get him to see you, to keep the connection alive. But once you say goodbye, all of that energy comes back to you. And when you redirect it into your passions, your friendships, your dreams, you start to rediscover parts of yourself that you lost along the way. That rediscovery is the foundation of your new chapter, and it's often more fulfilling than the love you thought you couldn't live without. And here's the most powerful part. While you're stepping into this new beginning, he's left facing the consequences of your absence. Your goodbye is his karma, but it's your liberation. He's dealing with regret while you're stepping into renewal. That split is where you truly see the beauty of letting go, because you're not just walking away from someone, you're walking toward yourself. You're choosing peace over chaos, clarity over confusion, and self-worth over self-sacrifice. Over time, you'll look back and realize that your goodbye was the moment everything started to change. It was the moment you stopped living for someone else's approval and started living for your own fulfillment. It was the moment you began building a life that actually reflects your value. That realization will make you grateful for the goodbye because it gave you back to yourself. And when the next chapter unfolds, when new love arrives, when opportunities appear, when joy feels natural again, you'll see that what felt like an ending was actually the greatest beginning of all. Your goodbye was never just about walking away from him. It was about walking back toward yourself. It was about reclaiming your peace, your standards, your worth. His karma is losing you, but your reward is everything you gain when you finally choose yourself. And that's the part people forget. Endings aren't tragedies when they lead to your freedom, so don't fear the goodbye, embrace it. Because it's not the end of your story, it's the start of the chapter where you finally become the main character of your own life,